Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying the new single out today, East of Eden. So if you haven't heard it, it's out today, go have a listen. If you missed the video I posted last week, this is the first release from an album I'm working on that is based on the key events in the biblical narrative that tries to tell the story of all of humanity from creation right through to new creation. But this song doesn't start with creation, so I'm hoping this is going to be track 2 on the album. So this song skips forward a bit and starts with what's commonly known as the fall. The reason for that, I just couldn't really figure out a way of doing creation well at this point for this context. So throughout the album, there's this protagonist that goes through, and it's kind of from his point of view. And I haven't yet been able to figure out a way of doing creation well in that context. I'm definitely going to, even if it has to be an instrumental. So creation will come, but for now, we start at the fall. So the song's set just outside the Garden of Eden after Adam and Eve are cast out of the garden for their disobedience. And so it's obviously based on Genesis 1-3, and I tried to bring out some of the main themes in that story. So when I was thinking about how to do this song, the first thing that came to mind was to do it from a very kind of sorry and repentant Adam. Because if I stuffed up the world, I'd be feeling pretty bad about it. And so that would have been a pretty easy route to take because, there's sadness, there's anger, there's all that stuff, which is great songwriting material. But the problem is the theme of repentance doesn't actually come up at all in the story. I don't know if you've ever noticed that before, but if you read Genesis 1-3, there's no hint of repentance. It's implied later on because his sons, Cain and Abel, that was their issue. Cain brought a sacrifice that wasn't pleasing to God. And so for me, the fact that they were engaged in some sort of sacrificial worship by that time must have meant that Adam at some point repented, turned back to God, and this was part of that, the establishment of a sacrificial worship system. So the repentance is implied, but it's not in the story that this is dealing with. So I didn't really want to add something that wasn't in the story to begin with. So whereas in my song, Adam, he's still he's still not happy. He's still sorry about what's happened, but it's more from a selfish point of view. He's spewing that he's been kicked out of the garden. He's spewing he's lost the presence of God, being with him all the time. He's spewing that everything's hard now, but which is very different to real repentance and turning back to God. So even though that's implied later on, it wasn't in the Genesis 1-3 story, so I tried to steer clear of that theme. So I imagine Adam and Eve being outside the garden after a really hot day working in the fields or whatever, and they feel this, because of the song's from Adam's point of view. So Adam feels the evening breeze and hears the rustle of the leaves, and it's kind of a really harsh reminder to him of everything that he's lost. Because when God comes after they've eaten the fruit, in the story of Genesis, when God comes and asks where he is, we read that Adam heard the sound of God walking in the evening breeze. So I wanted to include that because I thought, how in any significant event in life, we tend to remember absolutely everything about that situation in astonishing detail. So, we remember the smells, what we were wearing, who was there. We remember everything about it. So I imagine that for Adam, it would be a little bit similar, that in that moment of dread when he knew he'd really stuffed up and God was coming to find where he was, I imagine that as he heard that voice, "Where are you?" that he would have remembered everything about it. The fact that the evening breeze was blowing, the sound of the rustle of leaves. So I thought that they're almost teasing him, almost jeering him, and it was just a constant reminder of everything he's lost. And in the song, I tried to think, well, what would have been for Adam the biggest, most immediate thing that he was feeling? Because he probably didn't realize the significance of what he'd done and the repercussions that was going to have. But I thought, what was the thing that immediately would have cut him up? And I thought, well, it must have been the loss of the presence of God. The fact that God can no longer dwell with humans in the same way. So I tried to include that in the end of each verse. It says, I miss him so. I want to go back home. I'm trying to express the pain at the loss of the presence of God. Also in the story we read about, well, everyone knows this bit where Adam tries to shift the blame. So he puts all the blame on Eve. So I try to bring that across a bit. But also wanted to talk about their motivation for disobeying God. Why did they do it? They had this whole garden. And they essentially were wanting to make themselves their own gods, weren't they? And that's the essence of sin. When there's an unwillingness, a refusal to acknowledge and to submit to the sovereignty of God. And when we try and go beyond the limits of our creaturely existence, of our creaturely condition, that's sin. And of course, the tragic irony is that in reaching for more, Adam and Eve lost everything. So as I was studying Genesis 1-3 before I started writing this song, one of the things that really stood out for me was almost this wordplay on vision. So eyes and being able to see, having your eyes opened. Because we read that the serpent, he said to Eve that her eyes would be opened if she ate the fruit. And then we read that the tree was lovely to look at. It was a lust to her eyes. The fruit was good to look at. So all this stuff to do with the eyes, and then she has the fruit, and we read that yes, her eyes were opened, but when they were opened, what she saw was her nakedness, her insufficiency, her lack. So there's this terrible irony there that in wanting something that was beyond what they were created to have, in wanting themselves to become God, yes, their eyes were open, but they had now in fact become blind. The final section of the song, I imagined Adam a little bit further along down the road, weeks, months, years, I don't know, but a little bit further down the road, reflecting on what had happened and the penny slowly starting to drop on the significance of what he's done and the consequences of that. So I pictured him again in a field working in the hot sun, and just as he hears that evening breeze again, just remembering that question that God put to him, where are you? And the probing nature of that question starts to sink in a bit. It wasn't just where are you? It's time for dinner. I think that question was designed for Adam to examine himself a bit and actually think, oh, wow, where am I? Like, look at me now. So I imagine this scene where he's in the field and all the things that God created him to do, like his jobs as a human being, were now really hard as a consequence of his sin. So for Eve, one of the commands to humans was to be fruitful and multiply. Well, childbirth is now going to be extremely painful. His job was to look after the land. That's now really hard. So he's in the field and it all starts to become real to him. I imagine the sweat from his head, from all the hard work, hits the ground. And then as it sinks into the soil, he remembers what God said to him, that he came from dirt and to dirt he'll return. And I imagine that, as he's working, he cuts himself on a thorn. Well, thorns were part of the curse, that when he plants things now, there's going to be thorns there. It's going to be hard work. So there's this constant reminder of his sin and where he went wrong. But of course, it's designed to bring him back to God. Because the story of in Genesis didn't have that aspect of repentance, I tried to just keep it as him feeling sorry for himself and anger at what he'd lost, and anger at Eve, to again reflect another one of the curses, which was that there'd be enmity between man and woman. So that's about all for East of Eden, and just a little bit about where I was coming from when I wrote the song, what I was thinking. Let me know what you reckon. Make sure you're following all the stuff so that you can keep up to date. I'd love for you to come on this journey as I write this album. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.